Here's how I turn this trash shelf into a statement piece for any room. I literally found this shelf on the side of the road, which is where I find a lot of my projects. As you can see, it's covered in different colored paints. There are some stickers on those shelves and some graffiti along the sides and even on the back. But I picked up this shelf because it was real wood, and I can work with real wood. That's easy to strip down and to restain and make look brand new. So the first step was to fix some damage that I created myself actually in moving the shelf. I tore off this bottom piece, so I glued it back on, clamped it down, and let it dry. Then stripping the paints. I used citrus strip. It smells nicer than other chemical strippers. As you can see, I just used a gloved hand to spread it around. I covered all of the flat surfaces that I could. And then you have to let it dry for about a half an hour. You don't want to let citrus strip dry too much because then it becomes really hard and hard to strip off. So then I started stripping the paint. You can't really see this very well in the video, but I wasn't taking off a lot of paint. In fact, I was taking off a lot of stripper. Maybe I should have let the stripper sit for a little longer, but I think I got impatient. I did have to fix some nails that were sticking out. I really should have prepped this piece better and done that before stripping it, but oh well. After stripping it, you can see that there are still more coats of paint. I didn't even really get down to the natural woods yet. But I used some mineral spirits and steel wool to wipe off the rest of the stripper so I could get a better determination of what I was working with. I really should have done a second coat of stripper, but I didn't. I just didn't want to wait for it. So now I could start seeing some real wood under there, and I was ready to get to sanding. However, I washed it down one more time before sanding just to get any excess chemicals off of it. I then whipped out my orbital sander, and I sanded this piece probably for about 5 hours. Not 5 hours straight, I don't have that stamina, but 5 hours over the course of a week. The first goal was just to get these flat surfaces sanded down to the wood grain. In the process, I decided to take the back off so that I could get into those shelves easier and reach the parts better. I also took that top shelf off because, as you saw earlier, it was already loose and just easier to work with once it was removed. So here it is after the initial sanding. The flat surfaces are mostly sanded. Time to get into all those edges. So I'm going to take my detailed sander, it's the triangular one, to get into all of these corners that I couldn't reach with my orbital sander. However, when I plugged in that detail sander, it wouldn't work. It had died on me. I had used and abused it, and it served me well, but I wasn't going to wait for another one to come in the mail. So I used the sanding hack a friend taught me. You just take a block, in this case I'm using a sanding block, wrap it in some sandpaper of the appropriate grit you want, and just scrub it by hand. It takes a little elbow grease, but honestly, this went really smoothly and did not take a whole lot of effort on my part. And it really got in those corners nicely. Now I can take my orbital sander to the rest of this and get it cleaned up really well. Here she is, completely paint free, ready to be washed and stained. So I decided to paint the back just a flat black. And then I also decided that this shelf needed some legs. Legs can cost between $5 to $10 a piece, and I did not want to spend the money. So instead I created my own legs. I found this 2x2 board for $10 at the hardware store. I cut it into about 6-inch pieces, and I glued them on and tacked them with some nails. It makes for a really sleek modern look. As you can also see, I left a little graffiti on the bottom of the shelf as ode to its previous owners and previous use and abuse. So then it was time to stain. I always pre-stain my works. I didn't used to, I thought it was a waste, but then when I noticed my stains weren't going on very smoothly or evenly and were leaving streaks, I realized you gotta pre-stain a piece before you actually stain it. So the first stain color that I used on here was called Aged Wheat, And I thought it was going to give it some really pretty gray tones and a very modern, sleek Pottery Barn kind of look. However, it did not. It gave it green tones and was not at all the look I was going for. The video doesn't do justice as to how ugly it really did look. It was not good. So, dark walnut to the rescue. I stained over that with the dark walnut, and this gave it the look that I was going for, especially with the matte black that I used on the background and eventually used on the legs. The dark walnut really pops. And there she is, beautifully done in a dark walnut. Now this is going to be a slick, sophisticated, modern look. And then it's time to apply the top coat. I just used to wipe on polyurethane here. I always use a sponge brush to wipe these on. And I did about 2 coats. And there it is. Painted the legs black as well as the background. She looks so gorgeous. Really is this beautiful statement piece for any room.